So we are talking PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and you have some very interesting philosophies on it. First of all, you're a Green Beret,
Yep.
Special Forces, and you saw some stuff, and then you retired.
Yes.
And how many days after your retirement?
8 days.
8 days after your retirement, you were hit by a drunk driver, and that severely injured your left leg.
Yes.
And now you have a very stylish cane.
Yeah, it's a sweet cane.
Right. So, I think one of the interesting things we were talking about, which people there can relate to, is often you get anger. You must get anger when someone else, being irresponsible, drunk, basically a drunk loser, hit your leg. So you go through, you retire, you do how many years in the military?
25.
25 years in the military, you're looking forward to your post-military life. Some drunk loser comes and hits you. So naturally, the human response is you want revenge. And you don't want to mess with the Special Forces guy. I mean, this guy's going to know your license plate number, he's going to do recon, he's going to be ready. You don't want to make a Special Forces guy angry. So how did you overcome that?
That's a great question. One of the things that I got involved in was veterans relief. I knew even before I got out that I wanted to help guys that were struggling, coping with different issues in their life. I wanted to help them in whatever way I could at the time. In part of that journey, it took me to Folsom Prison. And the real awesome thing about sharing things with guys in prison is it's not going to leave prison. You can open yourself up and be as honest about any given issue as you want. And I wanted to exact revenge on this man that significantly affected my life and the lives of my family. You go down range and you do these things, and it's part of the job, it's part of the work.
Because you are basically, very functional special operations. Next thing you know, you're lying on a bed, you're taking pills for pain, and you're staring at a ceiling fan, and you start thinking, how am I going to provide for my family? This guy took everything from me. How do you shift that mindset to?
Well, as I said, I was in Folsom Prison. We were gathering information there on a counseling small group mentoring process that we thought we could apply to veterans in crisis out here. And all of my friends were very encouraging of revenge. In fact, in a lot of cases, like I said before, they were willing to help me in this revenge. But it took the guys in prison to really explain to me in a way that I needed to hear. The act of vengeance would have been the ultimate act of selfishness. So what do I mean by that? Basically, how it was explained to me is I was putting a higher priority on this man than my own freedom. I was putting a higher priority on this man over my family. And a career will come and go, friendships come and go, but the lasting thing is family. The legacy that you leave behind is your kids. And if I was to exact revenge on this man, basically would have been putting him above everything else.
Yeah, so basically you'd lose your freedom, you'd lose your family, and you're putting more importance on him,
Yeah.
the drunk driver loser,
Yeah.
than you are your own family and
Exactly.
your friends and your kids. So that's one way to look at it.
The interesting thing that one of the men said to me was, the guy was in my head and he wasn't even paying rent. So they broke it down for me in a way that I really needed to hear.
This is a valuable lesson, I think, for anyone, whether you're a veteran or not. Like, there are people that drive you crazy. You don't like them, enemies, bullies, whatever they are. Don't let them take space in your head and not pay rent. They're
Yeah.
not worth that. Don't even seek vengeance, because that means you're putting a priority to them,
Yeah.
a priority they don't deserve. So why would some drunk driver loser deserve priority that takes you away from your family and friends?
Well, I think that it's a natural feeling. More especially, I think that it's a natural feeling for us. You know, you go downrange and you do things because it seems very black and white. This is the bad guy. He needs to die. He needs to die for a number of different reasons: to protect myself, to protect my brothers. But this guy directly affected my life and my family. If there was anybody that deserved death, it was him. But like I said, you know, they explained it to me in a way that I really needed to hear, and I made a promise to them that I wasn't going to do it.
So you got your most insight from visiting prisoners.
That's right.
Another lesson is you can learn from anybody, right? Like,
Yeah.
everybody has different life experiences, and we always sit on a high horse and kind of claim superiority with our life experiences sometime. You know, you can learn from prisoners, you can learn from guys who've been through all sorts of stuff. It's a valuable lesson, because
Yeah.
I think, you know, human dynamics are tough sometimes. And
You know, Doc, the interesting thing about guys that are involved in the penal system, there's a direct correlation between them and military. It sounds weird, but let me explain it. So, a lot of military guys, especially people from my career field, they'll do their time in special operations, and then they'll get out and they'll do something that closely parallels what they did before. They're basically not really getting out.
right,
They're not transitioning out of that lifestyle. People that have been incarcerated, a fairly significant percentage of them commit crimes and they go right back into it.
Interesting.
I have been told, and I can't prove this, I've been told that in the corporate world, many corporate entities view veterans as these, every combat veteran has PTSD. Every combat veteran can snap, you know, and it's a stigma that is just absolutely untrue. But there are some striking similarities between those guys that were in prison and people in the military. I thought that it was really interesting. I mean, you know, our nation will send us to another country for whatever reason, and we end up doing these things, and we do these things, and they give us medals. As a civilian, you do these things, the same things, for whatever reason, and they put you in a cage.
Right.
It's a warrior caste group.
Mm-hmm.
One's doing it for flag and freedom. One's doing it for other reasons.
Interesting. And when you talk about PTS, that's also interesting, because
Yeah.
the stigma with corporate, you were saying, that fuels itself, because then veterans don't put it on their job applications because it may prevent them from getting the job. Whereas, in my medical opinion, I think it doesn't make sense to pin veteran behavior to an isolated traumatic event. We shouldn't be pinning this on the veteran or some isolated traumatic event. We should maybe look at ourselves as a society, because if we provide a society of brotherhood where they return, we welcome the veterans because they volunteered, went to war, and took injuries and sacrificed so we didn't have to, the rest of us. So I think, they took these injuries so that the employers didn't have to go out there. So the employers, it's their duty to provide that brotherhood when they come back.
Yeah, they say that it's less than 2% of our nation's population that has served.
Right.
That's past tense and present tense.
And
less than 2%.
Interesting, your perspective on PTS was, think about this. Do Taliban fighters in the caves get PTS? We're not calling it PTSD. We don't think it's a disorder. That's a different topic. But, and you think they don't?
I don't think that they do. I think that, historically speaking, hard times create hard people. If you look back in our history, in the human history, there's one thing that men are very, very good at, and that's killing each other. And there's nothing wrong with that when the situation calls for it. Certainly not in the case of a drunk driver, but
right.
I think that a hard environment creates hard people. What way does the military use to develop camaraderie? They take the group collective and they put them in an uncomfortable situation.
So do you think a lot of PTS today is because thankfully you were in a kinder environment growing up than maybe 100 years ago, 200 years during the Civil War, when it's tough to get food, if you got hip scratched, there were no antibiotics, you die from that.
Right.
It's an easier environment we grew up in now. So when you go to war, we're not as tough as prior generations were, or maybe
I think so.
Or maybe even people growing up in other nations, the Taliban fighters were using.
I think that has to be looked at closely, because as Americans, in the Western world, we live a very comfortable life.
And I think that's good. We don't want to go to a less comfortable life.
No.
But I think what we can do, and what we can take from his very important message, is that enjoy the comfortable life, realize it's a comfortable life, be grateful for it. But when guys come back, that 2% that serve, provide them a comfortable life, provide brotherhood, because that's what got you through. It's the guys who came and checked on you, flew from out of state to visit you, came and helped you with your bandage changes, things like that. So we should call it post-traumatic, not post-traumatic stress disorder, but post-traumatic lack of brotherhood syndrome.
Yeah, I think that as it pertains to post-traumatic stress, think about that. Post-traumatic stress. That means that we're talking about after the fact, there was a traumatic incident that happened for that individual. Okay, so let's say you come from a very comfortable lifestyle where things are easy, and then for whatever reason you're thrust into a situation where something very traumatic, as per that individual, occurs. Post-traumatic stress is simply, I think, that its mind has a hard time comprehending something very stressful that happened in their lives. For some people it could be somebody got shot and they were carrying them in their arms and they died. They could be in a convoy and the vehicle in front of them blows up and it sprays guts all over their turret. That's an extreme case.
Or for some people it's just getting yelled at by the drill sergeant if they
That's right.
grew up not ready for that sort of environment.
Exactly. So post-traumatic stress, it's all based on the individual, and it's the mind's physical and physiological response to something traumatic that has happened in their lives.
Right.
And there's a lot of different things that can trigger it. It's, you know, the sight, sounds, and smells of the battlefield. It's a scenario. Maybe it's a crowd. You know, it can be a variety of different things that do what? That bring them back mentally, that remind them of an incident, whatever that incident is. You know, and it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. You know, we talked about the things, we talk about what it is, we talk about some of the circumstances that revolve around an incident, things that can remind you of that incident, but then there's also a variety of different ways that it manifests itself. You know, from things as simple as on the high end extreme, you know, a guy that hides in the corner underneath a table, cold sweats, you know, got to stay in a dark room, something like that, you know, in its extreme case, or he snaps, you know, extreme, or something as simple as, hey, you know what, I don't want to be around anybody, I just want to be left alone.
Right. And there's a range of symptoms, and as physicians we can catch flashbacks, hallucinations, the guy under the table trembling in sweat. What you guys can help is catching the isolation, the loneliness, the soldiers who are pulling away. Those are the spouses who will recognize that, the co-workers, and you play a huge part too in decreasing those 22 suicides a day from veteran suicides, which is probably higher.
Yes, I believe that it is.
Yeah.
When you're talking about post-traumatic stress, it's veteran suicide is a very, very significant issue, and when you're downrange and something happens to your teammate, you're not going to just leave him hanging. You're going to stop and you're going to help him. So when you're not in the military anymore, or when you're back here in the world, what changes? Nothing changes. You help your teammate.
Kind of like those long road marches we did in the military.
Yeah.
If some people are struggling in the middle of the road march, you don't just march by them. You
That's right.
Stop and help them, which is the same metaphor in life.
Yeah.
When veterans come back, anyone in your life struggling, your family, friends, veterans or not, you help them.
That's right.
You provide that brotherhood.
I think that a lot of people will say that there is no solution. I personally believe that there is a solution. That solution comes in the form of camaraderie. It comes in the form of accountability to each other. How do you do that? You develop those relationships. You develop that network of trust. You build on the fact that there's a certain degree of relatability, you know, and when you have that relatability, you have that relationship, and then you continue to build on that relationship, and you know when your brother is struggling with something, hey, he might not have the solution, but guess what? We're a team, and together maybe we can find a solution. So for every one guy that is struggling, dealing, coping with an issue, there's at least 100 guys that have come before him that have dealt, struggled, coped with that very same issue. And of that 100 guys, there's got to be somebody that has negotiated that obstacle and come out the far side in a healthy way.
Right. So provide that brotherhood for your fellow brothers. The battle continues.
The battle continues.